The money hit the trash bin with a soft thud. "This is where trash belongs," she said, lips curling in satisfaction. The man didn't move. His phone glowed faintly in his hand, recording every word, every flicker of disdain. Around them, conversations faltered. Silver cutlery paused mid-air. No one spoke, but silence stretched taut, sharper than glass. She brushed her blazer, eyes gleaming with triumph, as though she'd just reduced him to nothing. He stood motionless, expression unreadable, the bills vanishing into coffee grounds and crumpled napkins. The scent of disinfectant drifted from a passing waiter, sharp as her cruelty, mingling with the perfume of untouched wine. Her smirk deepened, certain the humiliation was complete. But behind his stillness lay something colder than rage, an intent she couldn't read, yet would soon regret. What she thought was an ending was, in truth, the moment everything began to unravel. The brass doors of Le Jardin restaurant swung open at exactly 7:15 p.m., admitting Jonathan Harris into the warm glow of Manhattan's most exclusive dining establishment. His casual attire, a simple gray hoodie, dark jeans, and comfortable sneakers, stood in stark contrast to the opulent surroundings. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across cream-colored walls adorned with original French artwork, while the soft jazz ensemble in the corner provided an elegant soundtrack to the evening service. Jonathan paused just inside the entrance, his keen eyes taking in every detail of the restaurant he'd purchased that very morning. The papers were signed, the wire transfer completed, the keys officially in his possession. But tonight, he wanted to experience his new acquisition from a different perspective entirely. Claire Whitman materialized from behind the marble host station like a predator sensing weakness. Her gaze swept over Jonathan from head to toe with the practiced efficiency of someone trained to assess worth at a glance. Her expression shifted subtly, a slight tightening around the eyes, a barely perceptible downturn of her glossy lips. In those few seconds, she'd made her judgment. "Good evening," Jonathan said, his voice warm and professional. "I'd like a table for one, please." Claire's pause stretched just a beat too long, her fingers drumming against the leather-bound reservation book. "I'm sorry, but we're completely booked tonight." She didn't bother checking the book. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at McDonald's down the street?" A couple of servers paused in their rounds, exchanging glances. One of them, a young woman with kind eyes, looked uncomfortable but said nothing. The sommelier, polishing wine glasses behind the bar, smirked quietly. Jonathan remained perfectly still, his expression unchanged. "I see. I'm happy to wait if anything opens up. Our clientele expects a certain—" Claire let the word hang in the air like perfume, her gaze once again traveling the length of Jonathan's casual attire. "Standard, I'm sure you understand." The words carried weight beyond their surface meaning, each syllable carefully chosen to exclude without explicitly stating why. Jonathan understood perfectly. He'd heard variations of this conversation his entire life, in boardrooms and country clubs, at investment dinners and charity galas. The language was always polite, always plausibly deniable, and always devastating in its intent. He reached into his wallet with deliberate slowness, his movements economical and precise. "I appreciate your concern about standards," he said, his tone carrying just the faintest edge of something Claire couldn't quite identify. "Perhaps this might help clarify my ability to meet them." The American Express Centurion card caught the light as he placed it on the marble counter, its black surface reflecting the crystal chandeliers above. Claire's confident smile faltered for just a moment as her eyes fixed on the distinctive black card. The Centurion invitation only, requiring $250,000 in annual spending just to qualify. She'd seen them before, of course, in the hands of tech executives and Wall Street titans who frequented Le Jardin, but never carried by someone dressed like this. Her recovery was swift, professional skepticism replacing surprise. "Sir, this establishment serves meals starting at $200. Are you quite certain you can afford our prices?" Her tone carried the patronizing sweetness of someone speaking to a child who'd wandered into the wrong store. Jonathan's expression remained neutral, but his dark eyes held steady on her face. "I believe the card should answer that question." Claire lifted the Centurion card between two fingers as if it might contaminate her perfectly manicured nails. She walked to the payment terminal behind the host stand, her heels clicking against the marble floor with sharp precision. The card reader's soft beep seemed to echo in the sudden quiet that had fallen over the entrance area. She called the verification line. Twice. Other diners had begun to notice the commotion. A woman in pearls and Chanel glanced over from her table near the window, her conversation with her companion trailing off. A man in a tailored suit paused his phone call, watching the scene unfold with the detached interest of someone observing street theater. When the card finally verified, Claire's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She returned to Jonathan with the card held between her fingertips, her smile now razor-thin. "Very well. Right this way." She led him not to one of the prime tables by the windows overlooking Fifth Avenue, not to the intimate booths along the far wall, but to the darkest corner of the restaurant. A small two-top wedged between the restroom hallway and the server station, where the elegant ambiance gave way to the practical chaos of restaurant operations. The menu landed on the table with more force than necessary, its leather binding sliding across the white tablecloth. "The least expensive option is $50, Claire announced, her voice carrying clearly enough for nearby tables to hear. "For someone like you, I'll need payment in advance. Cash only." Jonathan opened the menu with calm deliberation, his fingers tracing the embossed lettering of the restaurant's name, his restaurant's name, as if seeing it for the first time. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd dreamed of this moment for months, ever since the acquisition talks began, but he'd imagined it differently. Around them, the restaurant continued its elegant ballet. Servers glided between tables with practiced grace, wine glasses were refilled with ceremony, conversations hummed with the comfortable confidence of wealth and privilege. But Jonathan sat in his corner, cataloging every slight, every assumption, every moment of casual discrimination with the precision of someone building a case. His phone buzzed softly against the table. A text from his assistant. "Board meeting moved to 8 a.m. tomorrow. Urgent." He typed back quickly, "Understood." The restaurant visit is providing valuable insights. Jonathan closed the menu and looked up at Claire, who had positioned herself with her back to the main dining room as if to shield the other guests from whatever unpleasantness might unfold. "I'll have the dry-aged ribeye with the wine pairing," he said. "The $180 option." Claire's eyebrows rose with practiced skepticism. "The full wine pairing adds another $70. Are you certain?" She emphasized the word certain as if questioning not just his financial capacity, but his very presence in civilized society. "I'm certain. That will be $250 total, plus tax and service charge naturally." She pulled out a small leather folder. "I'll need payment in advance. House policy for certain situations." It wasn't house policy. Jonathan had reviewed every operational document that morning during the acquisition meeting, but he said nothing, simply reached for his wallet again. The cash was crisp, fresh from the bank $20 bills in perfect condition. As he counted out the money, Claire watched with the intensity of a casino dealer checking for marked cards. She held each bill up to the light, running her fingers along the edges, checking the watermarks with exaggerated thoroughness. "People like you," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper but loaded with venom, "shouldn't pretend to be something you're not. This isn't your world." The words hit like a physical blow, but Jonathan's expression didn't change. He'd heard worse, endured more, survived decades of such moments. What struck him wasn't the cruelty. It was the casual nature of it, the way Claire delivered her judgment as if stating an undeniable fact about the natural order of things. When he handed over $300 to cover the meal and tip, Claire made a show of counting it twice. Then, with deliberate slowness, she peeled off the changed 2 20s and a 10 and held the bills suspended over the trash bin beside the host stand. "Trash for trash," she said, releasing the money. The bills fluttered down among the discarded napkins and half-eaten breadsticks, landing with a soft whisper that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Several nearby diners had turned to watch, their conversations dying as they witnessed the deliberate humiliation. Jonathan felt something cold and precise click into place in his chest. Not anger. Anger was messy, unprofessional, counterproductive. This was something sharper, more focused. This was justice finding its target. He reached for his phone, opening the Facebook Live app with steady fingers. The camera lens found Claire's face, capturing her satisfied smirk as she dusted off her hands. "Your kind always causes trouble," she continued, her voice growing bolder now, emboldened by what she perceived as Jonathan's passive acceptance. "I should call security. Better yet, maybe the police need to know about someone using suspicious cards in here." Jonathan's thumb pressed the Go Live button. A small red dot appeared in the corner of his screen, and viewer numbers began to climb. 12, 34, 67, 98. He opened his messages and typed quickly to his attorney. "Need you to review the discrimination files from today's acquisition. Priority 1. The response came back immediately. "Already on it." The previous owner left us quite a paper trail. Jonathan looked up at Claire, who was now speaking to the sommelier in hushed, urgent tones. They both kept glancing in his direction, their body language screaming discomfort and conspiracy. These patterns seemed designed to target specific people, he thought, watching Claire gesture dismissively toward his corner table. But do they know who they're really dealing with? His phone buzzed with a notification. 247 viewers and climbing. The first escalation came wrapped in a security uniform and an expression of profound discomfort. Marcus Williams, the restaurant's head of security, approached Jonathan's table with the careful gait of a man walking into a minefield. At 6'3" and built like a former linebacker, Marcus commanded respect in most situations. But tonight, his dark skin and kind eyes marked him as another player in Claire's twisted game. "Sir," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of reluctant authority, "I've been asked to speak with you about the situation." Jonathan looked up from his phone, where the viewer count had climbed past 500. "What situation would that be, Marcus?" He'd read the man's name tag, but something in his tone suggested familiarity that went deeper. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, his hands clasped behind his back in a parade rest position that spoke of military training. "Miss Whitman says you're making the other guests uncomfortable. She's asked me to escort you out." "And what do you think, Marcus?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Marcus's eyes flicked toward the host stand, where Claire watched with barely concealed irritation, then back to Jonathan. In that moment, Jonathan saw recognition dawning, not of his face, but of his situation. Marcus had stood where Jonathan sat now, had felt the sting of assumptions based on appearance, had navigated the careful line between dignity and survival. "I think," Marcus said slowly, "that you haven't caused any trouble that I can see." Claire materialized beside them like a storm front, her professional composure finally cracking. "Marcus, I gave you simple instructions. Remove this man immediately. He's disturbing our guests. The livestream viewer count hit 1,200. The second escalation arrived in the form of Helen Morrison, a regular patron whose family had been coming to Le Jardin for 3 generations. She swept toward their corner table with the imperious confidence of someone accustomed to having her complaints addressed immediately. "Claire, darling," Helen's voice carried the cultured tones of old money and older prejudices. "I'm trying to enjoy my anniversary dinner, but the atmosphere has become quite inappropriate. Perhaps you could address the problem?" She didn't look at Jonathan as she spoke, as if acknowledging his presence might somehow contaminate her. Instead, she fixed Claire with the expectant gaze of someone who'd never had a request denied. Claire's spine straightened, emboldened by the support. "Of course, Mrs. Morrison. We maintain certain standards here." She turned back to Jonathan, her voice rising enough to carry across the dining room. "Sir, you need to leave immediately. This is private property, and you're no longer welcome." The restaurant had fallen silent except for the soft jazz still playing in the corner. Servers paused with plates in their hands, diners turned in their chairs, even the bartender stopped polishing glasses. Everyone watched the confrontation unfold with the uncomfortable fascination of witnesses to a car accident. Jonathan's phone showed 2,847 viewers. Comments were flooding in. "This is disgusting. Sue them all. Don't let her do this to you. Expose them." The third and final escalation came when Claire pulled out her own phone, her fingers trembling with rage and adrenaline. "I'm calling the police," she announced, her voice shaking with righteous indignation. "You people always play the victim when you're caught where you don't belong. But this time, there will be consequences." She began dialing 911, her movements sharp and aggressive. "Yes, I need to report a disturbance at Le Jardin restaurant on 5th Avenue. We have an individual who's been asked to leave but is refusing to comply. He's recording our staff without permission, making threats." "I haven't made any threats," Jonathan said quietly, his voice carrying clearly in the hushed restaurant. "Don't interrupt me," Claire snapped. "Yes, officer, he's being belligerent." African-American male, mid-30s, wearing street clothes. "He's been harassing our staff and customers all evening." The lies rolled off her tongue with practiced ease, each fabrication more damaging than the last. Jonathan continued recording, his phone now showing 4,200 viewers and climbing. The comments section had exploded with outrage. "She's lying! This man hasn't done anything wrong! Call the restaurant and complain. Someone find out who she is." Marcus stood frozen beside the table, his face a mask of professional composure, barely concealing his personal anguish. Helen Morrison had retreated to her table but continued watching with predatory interest. Other diners pulled out their own phones, some recording, others Googling the restaurant's contact information. Jonathan felt the familiar weight of systemic injustice pressing down on him, the casual assumption of guilt, the weaponization of law enforcement, the way his very presence was treated as a threat worthy of state intervention. But beneath that familiar ache, something else stirred. Not the helpless rage of his youth, but the cold, calculating patience of someone who'd spent decades building the power to strike back. He opened his text messages and typed a simple message to his assistant. "It's time." The response came back immediately. "On my way. ETA 3 minutes." As Claire continued her performance for the 911 dispatcher, describing increasingly elaborate scenarios of disruption and threat, Jonathan allowed himself the smallest of smiles. She had no idea what she'd unleashed. None of them did. The viewer count hit 6,000 and the real show was about to begin. The landline behind the host's stand began ringing with urgent persistence, its shrill tone cutting through Claire's increasingly dramatic 911 call. She tried to ignore it, but the sound seemed to demand attention from everyone in the restaurant. Finally, with an irritated sigh, she put the dispatcher on hold. "Le Jardin, this is Claire," she answered, her voice tight with barely controlled frustration. "Ms. Whitman, this is David Chen from corporate headquarters." The voice was crisp, authoritative, tinged with urgency. "I need to inform you that as of this morning, Le Jardin restaurant has been acquired by Harris Hospitality Group. The new ownership structure took effect at 9 a.m. today, and the CEO will be conducting unscheduled visits to assess operations. Claire's expression shifted from irritation to confusion to something approaching relief. Oh, perfect timing. I'm dealing with a situation that requires management attention. We have a disruptive individual who's been harassing staff and customers. I've already called the police, but perhaps your new CEO could authorize additional security measures. I see. David's voice carried a strange note that Claire missed entirely. And what exactly has this individual done? Everything, really. Inappropriate behavior, suspicious payment methods, recording staff without permission, refusing to leave when asked. The kind of person who clearly doesn't belong in an establishment like this. The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough to make Claire uncomfortable. Sir? Are you still there? I'm here. Ms. Whitman, I need you to put whoever's in charge of this situation on the phone immediately. This is urgent. Before Claire could respond, the restaurant's main doors opened with a flourish that seemed to part the very air. Jessica Martinez, a woman in her early 30s with the bearing of someone accustomed to corporate power, strode across the marble floor with the confidence of someone who'd navigated hostile boardrooms and emerged victorious. She wore a charcoal gray business suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, and carried a leather portfolio that bore the embossed logo of Harris Hospitality Group. Her heels clicked against the floor with mathematical precision as she made her way directly to Jonathan's corner table. "Mr. Harris," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the now silent restaurant. "I have the documentation you requested." The portfolio opened with a soft rustle of expensive leather, revealing corporate letterhead, official seals, and the kind of legal documents that changed ownership of multi-million-dollar businesses. She placed them on the white tablecloth with ceremonial care, each paper landing with the weight of corporate authority. Jonathan rose slowly from his chair, his movements deliberate and controlled. When he stood to his full height, something in his bearing seemed to shift. Gone was the casual visitor, the man content to sit in dark corners and endure insults. In his place stood someone who commanded boardrooms, who made decisions that affected hundreds of employees, who'd built an empire one calculated move at a time. "Thank you, Jessica," he said, his voice carrying the quiet authority that marked true power. "I trust you've documented everything we discussed this morning regarding operational standards and staff conduct?" "Every detail, sir, including the discrimination complaint files from the previous ownership group. Quite extensive, I'm afraid." Claire stood frozen behind the host's stand, her phone call forgotten. The 911 dispatcher's voice, a tiny, tinny sound, coming from the receiver that dangled from her motionless hand. Her eyes moved from Jessica to the documents to Jonathan's transformed presence, and for the first time that evening, genuine fear flickered across her features. "Claire," Jonathan said, his voice cutting through the restaurant's absolute silence like a blade through silk. "I'm Jonathan Harris. I'm the CEO of Harris Hospitality Group. I purchased this restaurant at 9 o'clock this morning, which makes me your new owner, and for the past 37 minutes I've been recording everything." He held up his phone, its screen showing a Facebook Live broadcast with over 8,000 viewers and comments streaming past faster than the eye could follow. The small red recording light seemed to pulse with the rhythm of a heartbeat in the sudden, absolute quiet. Claire's face drained of color, her carefully applied makeup suddenly stark against skin gone pale as paper. The phone slipped from her nerveless fingers, clattering to the marble floor where the 911 dispatcher's voice continued asking if anyone was there, if emergency services were still needed. Marcus stepped forward, his entire posture changing from reluctant security to respectful acknowledgement. "Welcome to Le Jardin, Mr. Harris," he said, his voice steady and professional. "I apologize for everything that's happened tonight." Helen Morrison, who had been watching from her anniversary table with predatory interest, now sat frozen with a forkful of expensive seafood halfway to her mouth. Other diners began pulling out their phones, some joining the live stream, others frantically Googling Jonathan's name and corporate profile. The jazz ensemble, oblivious to the drama, continued playing their elegant soundtrack to corporate revolution. Crystal glasses caught the light, expensive wine breathed in decanters, and the scent of French cuisine hung in the air like perfume. But the restaurant itself had been fundamentally transformed in the space of 30 seconds. Jonathan looked around the dining room with the calm assessment of someone seeing his property clearly for the first time. Then his eyes returned to Claire, who stood trembling behind the host stand like a defendant awaiting sentencing. The viewer count on his live stream hit 12,000, and the real reckoning was about to begin. Jonathan's voice carried the weight of boardroom authority as he addressed the restaurant, but his eyes remained fixed on Claire's crumbling composure. "Claire Whitman," he said, each word precise and final, "you are terminated from your position effective immediately for gross violations of company policy, including racial discrimination, harassment of patrons, and conduct detrimental to the restaurant's reputation and values." The words hit like physical blows. Claire's knees buckled slightly, her hand gripping the marble host stand for support. "You can't! This isn't... I was protecting the restaurant's standards. By throwing a customer's money in the trash?" Jonathan's voice remained level, professional, devastating in its controlled fury. "By calling the police on someone whose only crime was requesting service? By lying to emergency dispatch about threats that never existed?" Jessica opened her portfolio again, removing a thick manila folder marked with legal letterhead. "Ms. Whitman, you're also being notified that Harris Hospitality Group will be filing a federal civil rights lawsuit against you personally, as well as criminal referrals for filing false police reports and harassment." The restaurant erupted in whispered conversations as diners processed what they were witnessing. Phones came out en masse, some joining Jonathan's live stream, others recording their own videos for social media. The story was already spreading across the internet like wildfire. Security officers from the corporate headquarters arrived as if summoned by some unseen signal. Unlike Marcus, these men wore suits and carried themselves with the authority of professionals who handled executive protection and corporate security. They flanked Claire with business-like efficiency. "Ma'am, you need to collect your personal belongings and leave the premises," the lead officer said. "You are no longer employed here, and you're trespassing." Claire looked around the restaurant with wild desperation, seeking support that would never come. Helen Morrison had retreated to her table and was pretending fascination with her anniversary dinner. The servers avoided her gaze. Even the bartender busied himself with unnecessary tasks. "This is my restaurant," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I've worked here for 8 years. I made this place what it is." "No," Jonathan said quietly. "You made this place what it was. That ends tonight." As security escorted Claire toward the exit, her composure finally shattered completely. "You can't do this to me! I was protecting this establishment's reputation. People like you don't belong in places like this." The words echoed across the marble floors and crystal chandeliers, broadcast live to nearly 15,000 viewers and recorded by dozens of phones. There was no taking them back, no claiming they were misunderstood or taken out of context. Claire had revealed her true nature before an audience that would never forget. Marcus approached Jonathan with careful respect. "Sir, I want to apologize for my role in tonight's events. Ms. Whitman instructed me to remove you, and I should have refused." Jonathan studied the security chief's face, seeing the genuine regret there. "You were put in an impossible position, Marcus, but you handled it with more dignity than most would have managed. In fact, I'm promoting you to assistant manager, effective immediately." The transformation in Marcus's expression was immediate and profound. Years of careful navigation, of swallowing pride and accepting impossible situations seemed to fall away. "Thank you, sir. I won't let you down." Within an hour, Le Jardin had been invaded by media crews. Channel 7 News arrived first, followed by reporters from the New York Times, CNN, and a dozen local outlets. The story had everything: corporate intrigue, social justice, and the kind of dramatic reversal that made for compelling television. By midnight, the hashtag Le Jardin Justice was trending nationally. The original live stream had been viewed over 2 million times, with thousands of shares and comments. Corporate communications departments across the country began drafting memos about discrimination training and inclusive hiring practices. The National Restaurant Association issued a statement condemning discriminatory practices and announcing new diversity guidelines. Stock prices for Harris Hospitality Group rose 7% in after-hours trading as investors responded positively to the company's principled stance. Claire Whitman's professional life imploded with stunning speed. By morning, her LinkedIn profile had been deleted. Her industry contacts had gone silent, and employment lawyers across Manhattan had begun receiving calls from potential clients who claimed to have witnessed her discriminatory behavior toward other customers over the years. The criminal charges came down 48 hours later, filing false police reports, harassment, and violation of federal civil rights laws. The district attorney, facing public pressure and clear video evidence, announced that the case would be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. But perhaps the most devastating consequence transcended legal ramifications. Claire Whitman had been exposed in the most public way possible. Her casual cruelty, her automatic assumptions, her comfortable wielding of systemic prejudice, all of it captured in high definition and broadcast to the world. The internet never forgets, and her actions would follow her forever, a digital scarlet letter marking her as the face of workplace discrimination. In his corporate office the following week, Jonathan received hundreds of messages from people sharing their own stories of discrimination, their victories and defeats, their hopes for systemic change. Restaurant workers wrote about management that protected discriminatory practices, while other executives reached out seeking guidance on implementing inclusive policies. Justice, Jonathan reflected while reviewing the correspondence, sometimes wore the simple face of accountability, but more often it looked like the gradual transformation of systems, the patient work of changing hearts and minds, one conversation at a time. 2 days after the incident, Jonathan sat in his executive office overlooking Central Park, the city's morning energy flowing past his windows. His laptop displayed the final live stream count. 4.2 million views, with shares and comments still climbing. He opened Facebook Live again, addressing nearly 50,000 viewers who had joined within minutes. "What happened at Le Jardin wasn't an isolated incident," he began. "It was the visible manifestation of patterns that exist throughout our industry." Claire Whitman's actions were inexcusable, but they were also predictable, the result of systems that allow discrimination to flourish. He gestured toward documents on his desk. Today, Harris Hospitality Group is announcing several initiatives: mandatory bias training for all staff, anonymous reporting systems for discrimination complaints, and a scholarship fund for hospitality students from underrepresented communities, $500,000 annually. Marcus Williams, now Director of Operations for the Northeast region, exemplified the leadership needed for change. The promotion had surprised him, but Jonathan recognized the integrity and moral courage required to drive systemic transformation. Change happens when ordinary people refuse to accept discrimination as normal. Jonathan continued. When customers demand better, when employees report violations, when communities hold businesses accountable for their values, not just their profits. Jonathan leaned forward slightly, his eyes meeting the camera lens with the intensity of someone delivering a final argument to a jury. The viewer count had stabilized at just over 90,000 people from around the world, all waiting for his closing words. "So here's my challenge to everyone watching," he said, his voice carrying the quiet conviction that had built his business empire. "The next time you witness discrimination, whether it's in a restaurant, an office, a store, or anywhere else, don't stay silent. Record it if you can do so safely. Report it to management, to corporate headquarters, to regulatory bodies. Support the victim. Make noise." He picked up his phone, the same device that had captured Claire's cruelty, and broadcast it to the world. This little piece of technology has given every person the power to shine light into dark corners, to expose injustice, and to hold the powerful accountable. Use it. The comments were flowing faster now, people sharing their own stories of discrimination witnessed and confronted, of moments when they'd found the courage to speak up or regretted staying silent. "Recorded my manager being racist last week. HR finally listened. Stood up for a customer at my store. Got in trouble, but worth it. Teaching my teenagers to never ignore discrimination. Small actions can create big changes." Jonathan's expression shifted slightly, a hint of something mischievous crossing his features. It was the look of someone who'd played a long game and was finally ready to reveal the full scope of his strategy. And for those managers, executives, and business owners who might be watching, those who think they can treat people poorly because of assumptions about power or status, I want you to remember something very important. He paused for effect, letting the silence build across the digital space where nearly 100,000 people waited for his words. You never know who you're really talking to. The smile that crossed his face was neither cruel nor triumphant, but rather the expression of someone who understood the delicious irony of the universe's occasional sense of justice. That person you're dismissing might be your next customer, your future boss, or someone with the power to change your entire world with a single decision. Treat everyone with respect and dignity, not because you're afraid of consequences, but because it's the right thing to do. He gestured toward his office windows, where New York City hummed with the energy of 8 million people pursuing their dreams, fighting their battles, and writing their own stories of justice and redemption. But if basic human decency isn't motivation enough, then remember this: someone is always watching. Someone is always recording, and in today's connected world, your true character will eventually be revealed to everyone. The final viewer count hit 103,000 as Jonathan prepared to end the broadcast. Across the internet, the story continued to spread, inspiring conversations in corporate boardrooms and family dinner tables, in college classrooms and community centers. "Choose dignity," he said, his voice carrying across the digital divide to reach people in every corner of the country. "Choose justice. Choose to be better than the worst assumptions people might make about you." He reached for his laptop to end the stream, then paused for one final thought. "And remember, respect is earned through character, not assumptions. Choose wisely." The screen went dark, but the conversation was just beginning.